Okay, I'm gonna, it's 7 uh 7:08 on May 29th. My name is Jeffrey Mullen. I'm the acting chair of the Milton Board of Appeals. I'm going to call to order tonight's hearing, 7 o'clock hearing, upon the application of the Milton American Legion Post 114 in response in with respect to the application for a special permit to generate income in order to continue donating, sponsoring Milton Girls Softball, Milton Youth Baseball, Milton Youth Football, in operating costs for the hall, et cetera, for use as a commercial overnight parking. The application was submitted to the board on March 21st, 2025 by the applicant, Mr. Daniel Lane. It was also signed by Marion McKettrick, who I see is here with us today. It was accompanied by a letter from Mr. J. Bolio, the interim Milton building commissioner, in which he indicated that there were construction vehicles and construction equipment being stored on the property, and the current use of the property as a private club exists under the auspices of a special permit granted by the Board of Appeals dated January 8th, 1965. The special permit allows for the use of this property as a private club only. The regular parking and/or storage of large construction vehicles is not permitted under the terms of the permit and is therefore prohibited. Upon receipt of this notice, you must cease the use of the property at 123 Granite Avenue for the storage of construction equipment and construction vehicles. Failure to comply with the directive or failure to seek an amendment to the special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals for this prohibited use within 30 days may cause this office to seek remedy through the courts. That is the letter that accompanied the application. Bear with me. Uh, we also received a letter from Mary McKettrick, counsel to the applicant, dated May 28th, 2025, in which I won't read the letter because I see Ms. McKettrick is here and can represent the applicant and explain what's in the letter and the arguments for the special permit. With the letter, she encloses a plan which indicates it's a portion of the premises, and it indicates where the parking is being conducted. I believe there's also a letter in the file. Is there a letter that we received today in support of the application, Bill? Is that right? Did I see that?
I do believe so.
Um,
Forwarded by Attorney McKettrick.
okay, hang on a second. Okay, I see that. Okay, I see that. Uh, the letter from Mrs. McKettrick, I see. Is there another letter? I apologize.
There are a couple of emails, Jeff, that one from Milton Youth Football and Cheer, and another email from Regina Malley at 52 Barton's Lane, town meeting member P8, on behalf of the Pierce PTO.
Okay.
I have a list of the letters. When you admit me to speak, I can list them for you.
Okay.
There are 8.
We have 8 letters?
Yes.
Okay.
Some were submitted with the original application. 2 were submitted yesterday or today. They just came in recently. And then there was also a petition with signatures.
Okay. Okay, why don't we hear the testimony from the applicant as to the merits of the application, taking notice of the letters that have been submitted, and we'll document that at some point during this hearing. But why don't you proceed, Marion? Welcome to the Board of Appeals. With me is Kathleen O'Donnell, member of the chair of the Board of Appeals, and Chris Hart, member of the Board of Appeals. Marion, welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you. I'm Mary
You're welcome.
McKettrick, and I'm representing the applicants. They filed the original application with a couple of documents before they engaged me, and we've since had several meetings to discuss this application. So I did file a full set of documents and an application letter originally with this board in order to have this hearing scheduled. And then I filed a follow-up letter with a little bit of additional information. I believe it was yesterday, it may have been the day before. And I was supposed to include a clearer plan of the parking areas with the letter, which I didn't do, but I have since sent it to you, and I believe all the board members have it. So I want to say, just as a matter of introduction, that some of the members or all of the members of the board for the Milton Post 114 may be in attendance tonight. They are Daniel Lane, clerk, Jack Carlson, the president, Paul Coughlin, director, Patrick Connolly, director, and TJ Mayo, or Terrence Mayo, the treasurer. I have met with all of the board members. They are all, most of them relatively new to the board, not new to the Post, but their task has been to organize the operation, review the finances, try to figure out ways to keep this Milton Post 114 solvent and operating, and in order that it can serve veterans, as it always has, and also so that it can continue to provide all kinds of services to town organizations and to be an available sort of event place. At the present time in Milton, with the loss of the Milton Women's Club, the Hoosick Club, and the VFW Hall on Brook Road, there is no place that a family can rent for a small event. And if they have ties with the Post, they are able to use this facility. So it really serves multiple purposes. None of these things directly relate to the request for parking, except that it takes money to keep a post like this open. And their present financial situation is such that they are breaking even, but they do not have enough money going forward. They need to find ways to generate additional revenue. The idea of providing a license or lease for commercial parking on a portion of the premises is one idea they have in order to do that. And they did start allowing such parking. They then received a letter from the building department saying, no, you can't do that. That's not allowed by your existing special permit, suggesting perhaps that they could apply to see if the Board of Appeals would consider amending that permit, perhaps to allow this. So at the present time, they have a utility company that's interested in parking their vehicles there overnight. These are vehicles, some of them would be like construction vehicles, and another entity that has some construction vehicles they'd also like to park. So I've given you a plan. It's not different from the plan that was submitted with the application, but I think it's clearer and easier to look at. And the plan shows you parking area number 2, which is in the front closer to Granite Ave, which is approximately 6,000 square feet, and parking area number 1, which is to the rear, and this is on both sides of the monopole facility that you can see when you go by this Post site. So the rear portion is smaller. It's only 1,560 square feet. Those are the 2 parking areas within their large parking lot that the Post is suggesting they would very much like to provide some commercial parking ability on, which would allow them, of course, to receive revenue. It's also the case that there is just a real lack of space for commercial parking in the East Milton area. There are construction projects going on. There's very little parking available anywhere. So at least in the short term, there's a great need for some of this parking. So obviously they don't have any arrangement right now. There are still some vehicles there. If the board does not grant this request for an amendment, then those vehicles will be removed. One of the other things that happened after they started parking these vehicles was that the Conservation Commission inquired as to whether perhaps they had some commercial vehicles that were too far back, too close to the wetland areas. So the conservation agent came out and did a site visit, went back to the Conservation Commission and indicated and showed the Post board members where the line was. So one reason the rear parking area is quite a bit smaller, and the reason the whole parking area can't be in back of the monopole is because there has to be a setback from wetlands back there. So they're only as far back in this plan that I sent you today as they would be allowed to be, as we understand it, by the Conservation Commission. So the utility company has agreed that if they could get a short-term license to park, that they would be willing to pay for new fencing and new landscaping around the front parking area, as well as there's going to be some fencing also around the rear parking area. The issue in the front, of course, is this site is across from the golf course. No, the applicants certainly don't want to present an unpleasant or ugly facade to the street. They also want to make sure that their neighbors further down Granite Ave, who can see one corner of their lot, are not looking at these construction vehicles. Although we are all aware that, right next to this site, separated by a narrow passageway, a narrow piece of land, there is the state public works yard. But, that's a public use and they can use the yard there. This is a private lot and commercial vehicles are not allowed by right. So they've offered to pay for fencing and they've offered to pay for landscaping. The plan shows you some suggestions for where landscaping would be placed. This proposal is for fencing that would be 6 feet high, placed on top of a 2-foot cement block base. So it would be an 8-foot fence. It would be a white plastic fence, and it would be the same style and the same appearance as the fence that's now in place around the monopole in the center of this and to the right of this property. The applicants, we've discussed the landscaping. They actually have planted some fruit trees already. You can see them in some of the photos that I sent to you today. The applicants have discussed with this contractor or the utility company how much landscaping would they be willing to put in? What would they be willing to do? And they basically said, tell us what you feel. Have the town tell you what they feel is necessary. They think they could probably provide whatever would be required. So that's a bit open. We can change the plan if you don't think it's adequate, but that's only if you get to the point where you're considering issuing a permit with conditions. The post was originally permitted in 1964 as a lot and a building for use as a private nonprofit club. It's an allowed use by special permit in Milton's zoning bylaws. And the requested amendment would leave in place conditions in the original special permit which prohibit any parking on Granite Ave. The post has had as a tenant on the premises for a number of years a cellular monopole company. That's an allowed use under Milton's zoning bylaw under certain circumstances, which were satisfied in this case. And that use is currently permitted through 2029. The lease does provide annual revenue to help support post operations. And the hope was that another means could be found to increase that revenue so as to keep the operation going. These commercial uses, the monopole use is considered a commercial use for tax purposes. The post is responsible for payment of those taxes and is up to date at the present time. At the present time, Milton Post 114 really finds itself in need of additional operating revenue, and it's a significant need. They basically have had to use up whatever resources they had accumulated to pay some past obligations. This is a new board. They're trying to start off on the right foot, and they've paid off all their current obligations, but they need to raise money. You can see there's, I believe, 9 letters of support from various town organizations and a couple of individuals filed with this application. And some of them are pretty good. They're all eloquent in the sense that they say that the Post has done one thing or another to keep their organizations going. The Post provides scholarships to the high school, to graduating seniors. They allow Milton organizations to come in and have a fundraising dinner on their premises, or sometimes they'll just hold an event to sort of help them celebrate the end of the season. So in some ways, this Post is an extension of the operation of a number of Milton organizations. A lot of them are sports organizations, and they are very supportive of any effort to keep this post operation going. And the other thing, of course, that we all know about is that the Milton Post is the only veterans organization in Milton, and it is essential to the veterans observances that the town holds. And I know the Post was recognized at the Memorial Day services recently for that. It really would be difficult to do these events without this organization. And maybe someday it won't be able to survive, but it certainly has a life of a number of years ahead of it, providing we can find a way for it to survive financially. Um, so in sum, just to sum up the application, what we're trying to say is this is an organization that's supported in this town, but they are very aware that by proposing this use, this parking use, they could have an impact on neighbors who live nearby and are able to see at least one corner of their lot. So they're proposing the use, but they also are proposing to screen any unsightly views of the front parking area and the corner of their lot with fencing and with landscaping. So they're open to whatever is necessary. They have discussed this some, and could continue to discuss it with anyone who feels they might have some view of the property. But the Post does provide significant benefits to the town. We feel that there's a way to do this without a significant detriment to residential properties nearby. And these residential properties are not directly across the street, but they are right down Granite Ave, so they can see one corner of the lot. Finally, it's a really unique location. I mean, they're next to the state DPW yard. They have the expressway in back of them. They have wetlands around the property. And there's a golf course across the street. They're not directly across the street from a housing development. So it's not easy to find the right mix of uses here that's still low impact and can provide some revenue. If the Post closes, and I've been very close to the point of considering closing in the last few years because of their finances, then there's going to be another use here. I don't know what it's going to be, but I suspect that there isn't going to be much that will be proposed that will be as low impact as this function hall use and the parking area. So there's always a compromise in these things. There's always potential impact, but I think if screening and fencing can be done adequately, I hope at least that the board will consider granting this relief.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. McKettrick. Let me catch up on a couple of pieces of homework. The board will take notice of the letters to which you referred, and I also want to acknowledge that your application included several supporting materials, including information about the Post nonprofit status, the deed to the property, some decisions that the board has participated in the past, and the special permit itself from 1964 or 65.
Right.
Let me ask you what you would believe to be the standard of review to which the board should apply in considering this application.
I'd like to ask the board to consider it as a modification of the special permit.
So
I
it would
think
be not detrimental, significantly detrimental to the neighboring properties that along that lines, the
That
standard.
would be the standard for a modification of a special permit. And let me just add that in my application at various times, I mentioned variance because we're talking about a use here. There are a number of reasons why I think this fits much better as a modification of the special permit, primarily because they have a special permit. But the other reason is that if you grant a variance for commercial parking on this property, it goes with the land, it's permanent. If you grant a modification of the special permit, you can limit it in time. You can ask the organization to come back and have it renewed if they so desire. And you can set a lot of conditions. So I don't think we're looking for changing the property use forever to a commercial parking lot. And so I didn't think a variance was appropriate.
Oh, that's fair. Let me ask you, how much outreach has the board done with respect to I understand you've got some special commercial, institutional neighbors, but what about the neighborhood that's out there? Has there been any outreach with them?
Yes, around the time that I first was meeting with the board, they invited neighbors, and these would primarily be the Cortlandt Circle, Thistle Ave, those neighbors to come to a meeting. There were some other people there from the town to discuss this application. And that's one reason they have some supporting signatures from some of those neighbors on their petition. And there are or maybe neighbors, particularly the neighbor who's on the corner that has the view of the corner of this property, that have concerns about what this commercial parking would look like. It wasn't a meeting where everybody said, we really love you and this is fine and nobody objects, but they had a pretty good discussion. They've continued to be available and will be continuing to discuss, particularly if this is an issue of how much do we need to do to make sure we're screening the view of this parking for you. So I think they've tried to reach out to their neighbors, and they're continuing to do that.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to get into too much into the details of the post's finances, but you did reference it in your application. I'm wondering if you could share with the board whether this is a significant stopgap measure to the board, or whether or not this is a minor issue and perhaps the board could expect more and more of this type of thing as the post works to recover.
Well, if possible, if there's anybody here from the board, I'd love to have them supplement my response. But my impression in the meeting I've had several meetings with them, is that this might not seem like a huge amount of money, whatever the licensing fees are paid by these commercial entities, but it's a significant amount for the post. And the reason is that it's revenue that's going to come in on a predictable basis for a period of time. And in that way, it is similar to the monopole lease that they have. That's a predictable amount of revenue. It's not huge, unfortunately. So they do feel that this will put them on a basis, an operating basis that they then can go forward with. And just for example, they need to do handicapped access improvements to their building. They just feel that they should. It's a veterans building, and it's not as handicapped accessible as it should be. The revenue from this will allow them to make those improvements. And as an ongoing matter, the building needs a certain amount of attention and expenditure. And they don't hold a lot of fundraising otherwise themselves. They will occasionally lease the property for a party or something like that. They make some money that way. One reason we don't have the Milton Women's Club anymore, and one reason we don't have the Who's Club anymore, is that type of revenue on a limited basis doesn't seem to be enough to sustain this type of private club. So they do need some other revenue. This would be very important to them. The answer I've been given is that, should they not get this permit, of course they would try very hard to find another way to do this. But they feel that this would put them back where they should be so that they can operate in a proper way, in the way that they have in years past. If there's anybody here, does your clerk see that any of the board members are here? Dan,
Is there somebody at the members
is
of
Daniel Lane here?
itself that would like to be heard?
I see Terrence Mayo. Is he one of your board members?
Yes.
And
If he
Dan,
would like to speak about that, he could, or anyone else who's here.
pardon me just a moment. Mr. Mayo, would you like to speak for the post? You're muted.
Yeah, I could make just a brief statement. Thank you guys for hearing this, obviously. Thank you, Ms. McGetrick. We're definitely in a little financial peril, and this will help. We have no employees, nobody's getting paid, 100% volunteer throughout the entire building. And in order for us to give as much money as we are to all the youth sports, Milton Wildcats cheer, all of them, that essentially is what makes it possible. Without that, we would definitely have to cut back, maybe all the way. Hopefully we could still give some, but not totally sure without knowing the numbers. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayo. Mr. McCutcheon, a couple more questions I'm going to ask my fellow members. Let's talk about the parking itself. You talked about the space. We've seen that on the drawing. Do you have an idea of how many trucks that space would accommodate, given the user? Question one, and then the second question is there a sense of whether or not this is all day, overnight? Is it 24/7? What would we expect would if this use were to be continued?
It's a tricky question to answer, the first one.
Well, it has to do with how big the
But I'm
trucks are.
going to try to answer it. I'm not going to be able to give you a number of vehicles. I did send you some photographs today, and a couple of them do show some vehicles because there are some on the site right now. And you can see from looking at those pictures that there are some trucks and there are some vehicles that have, a crane that's lowered and raised. Those are bigger. They take up more space. So it really depends on the types of vehicles that at any one time need to be parked there. I'll take the utility company as an example. They go out during the day with their vehicles. They bring them back in the evening. That doesn't mean that the lot will be empty because they might have a vehicle or equipment that they're not using that day and it would stay there. So what they are looking for is a place where they know they'll be able to park as many vehicles as they can fit into that square footage, but it depends on the types of vehicles, how many that will be when they need to. So it's not going to be full all the time during the day. It is likely vehicles would be parked there on the weekend and certainly overnight. That is the purpose of having this parking area available. Sorry, I forgot your second question.
Question was time of day,
Oh.
overnight parking, 24/7, et
Yeah,
cetera.
we're asking for if we were going to get permission to, if they were going to get permission to do this, they would need permission to do it whenever they need it. So during the day or in the evening or on the weekend.
Fair enough. Let me ask my colleagues if they've got any questions of the applicant at this time. Mr. Hart.
Just a follow-up to the last question that Mr. Mullen asked, which I'm looking at the March 6th letter from the interim building commissioner discussing in response to recent complaints from neighbors observing the construction vehicles. And I'm just curious to know, I don't know if you would know this question, but the answer to this question is the configuration, the number of those vehicles that led to those complaints, would that essentially be the same as the configuration and anticipated number of vehicles under the plan, or has the applicant essentially responded in part to those complaints and this plan essentially reflects a way to obviate the concerns that led to those complaints while seeking the variance, or I'm sorry, seeking the modification?
In terms of the number, I think that the principal issue is the front lot, because that's a lot you can see. Well, you can't see it for the most part, but you see it at the corner. If you were down the street and looking back towards this lot, you would see the corner. Now, the corner is vegetated. So the parking doesn't go right up through the corner. It's already vegetated, but the parking is visible from that corner. And if you had a big truck parked there, and that's what they had when these complaints came in, and there was no fencing, and there was no additional trees and landscaping, you could see it. So they can't reconfigure, well, they haven't proposed moving the parking. One of the reasons is they can't move it back. That would be the obvious thing to do. But there are wetlands in back of this property. They can't move more trucks to the back of the lot. And the left side of the lot is where the post building is. In general, the rear part of this lot begins to get too close to wetlands. So they can't, you particularly can't you don't want construction equipment and trucks parked anywhere near wetlands. Conservation Commission clearly had a concern with that. And there may have been some trucks parked there when this complaint came in, but they were all moved out of that back area, and some were moved out completely in response to the Conservation Commission concerns. And so the layout of the back part of the parking here is actually is much smaller. Now, the way that the Post is trying to respond to these concerns is by coming up with a plan for screening. And that's what the fencing and the trees, and it could be trees and bushes. The trees are small, but they are actually nice flowering fruit trees. And they certainly could put other trees in as well. They could have some evergreens in there too. That's the way they've tried to respond. That's the way they think they could provide mitigation for any impact. So that's where it stands.
Thank you. That's helpful. I have no other questions right now.
Mrs. O'Donnell.
I don't, I mean, I kind of agree with, Ms. McGetrick that, a variance isn't really appropriate in this circumstance. And so I do think the modification of the special permit's the way to go. But I don't have any other questions. I appreciate getting the last little map because I was kind of wondering where the parking was supposed to be. I've driven and ridden past this property very frequently, and there's always seemed to have been trucks on it around the monopole. So, I'm not surprised by this request.
Okay, let me, I don't have any further questions at this point. Let me ask if there's anybody in the audience who'd like to be heard in support of the modification to the special permit. Bill?
Okay, let's see, who's in support? Could you raise your hand? We have Kevin Chrism. Pardon me just a moment.
Mr. Chrism, welcome
Chrism?
to the Board of Appeals.
Good evening. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, members of the board. My name is Kevin Chrism Jr. I reside at 62 Cortlandt Circle, a town meeting member of Precinct 7 and elected constable here in town. Tonight, on behalf of many of my neighbors, speaking here tonight in strong support of the American Legion Post 114 and the request to amend their special permit. As a direct neighbor of the Post, I can really think of no greater partner and group of leaders for our town and neighborhoods than this current executive board of the Post. The work the board has done to improve the quality of their property so far, both indoors and outdoors, has been very well received by so many. For many years, growing up in Cortlandt Circle, residents would drive by the property and oftentimes see an empty parking lot with almost no life to it. Now, thanks to this current board, the work they've done, not a weekend goes by where the parking lot really isn't filled to the brim with cars, and from retirement parties, community events, political campaign kickoffs, everything, so much more. The Post has really become the go-to spot for individuals from near and far, really, to gather. And it's really been great to see, to enjoy the company of others. I want to read to you the mission statement of the American Legion. This stood out to me at most, and it says, quote, "To enhance the well-being of America's veterans, their families, our military, and our communities by our devotion and mutual helpfulness." When the leaders of the Post 114, I think, and many of my neighbors do as well, have gone above and beyond that mission by all their great work in such a short amount of time they've taken over. This has been really, so far, a strong partnership with our neighborhood. And I can't speak for all neighbors, but many of them, we do have the utmost confidence in their plans right now and for the future. I would encourage anyone who's had the pleasure of attending an event at the Post to read the handwritten letters of Milton High School students who've been awarded scholarships from the Post, and combine this with the work of, as mentioned earlier by Attorney McEtrick, the work with them, the Milton youth organizations and the sports groups, and the students planning to enter military upon graduation. The work of the Post and the board extends to so many in this town. And finally, on the area in question, at a recent neighborhood meeting, which I and several of my neighbors attended, the board shared with us their plans to make the area cleaner and spruce it up with the fencing and other improvements made to it. And they also spoke about, as was mentioned earlier, their plans regarding handicapped accessibility, which is obviously a necessary and long-term goal of theirs. The plan that this board has, being the Post Board 114, is contingent on additional revenue streams in their continual operation. And by approving this special permit request, that the American Legion Post can continue their efforts in partnering with our community and making this location a continued place for all. And these members, so they can continue to work with everybody, particularly our veterans. They've served our town in these roles now, and they've defended our nation in theaters of war. Given all this, again, several of my neighbors and I urge your board, the Zoning Board of Appeals, to approve this special permit request. I want to thank you all very much for your service and what you all do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chisholm, for your testimony. Bill, is there anybody else who'd like to speak in support of the modification to the special permit?
Okay, we see several hands up here. I see Joan Fall's iPad. Pardon me just a moment. Joan?
Hi, good evening. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, hi.
Welcome to the
Hi.
Board of Appeals.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name's Joan Ball. I live at 172 Granite Ave, and I'm a town meeting member for Precinct 7. And I just wanted to call in to show my support for the current board. I consider the post, I'll always know it as Heritage Hall. I've lived in Milton for 38 years, right down the street in the same spot. And it's really been part of the fabric of our neighborhood for many years. I was able to attend that community meeting a couple of months ago, and I was really impressed with the current board, with their dedication to work to turn around what had recently become a rundown hall. They want to do what's best for the neighborhood, but conceded that the expense of getting back the post back operational was unexpected and required some creative solutions. It's unfortunate that a communication lapse ended up in us being here today. I've been to many functions at Heritage Hall over the years ago. Then it had kind of fallen by the wayside, but over the last couple of years, I've been to a lot. Their outdoor space, if you ever have the chance to go and experience it out there, it's phenomenal. And I really am so excited to have it back functioning with the caring board after years of neglect. So I really encourage you to say yes to this modification of the special permit. I think certainly the neighborhood will benefit, as will the town of Milton. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Fall. Appreciate your testimony. Bill, is there somebody else who'd like to speak in favor?
Yeah, we have two more hands. I see Kevin Garvey.
Mr. Garvey, welcome to the board.
Hello, my name is Kevin Garvey. I live at 33 Cortlandt Circle. I'm a lifetime resident here in Milton. I'll try to keep it short. I grew up in this neighborhood, and I've seen this post through the years go up and down. I must say that what this board has been doing and what, for the neighborhood recently is outstanding. And I think they deserve a chance to continue to make the community a better place. And that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garvey. Bill?
And then we have Tracy Nerritt. You can make your comment now, Tracy. Hello, Tracy.
Ms. Merritt, welcome to the board. How may we help you?
Don't seem to be. They're unmuted. I'm not sure what's happening.
Okay. We'll note that she was requesting to appear during the support period of this application, and to the extent that she's able to work out her technical difficulties, we'll agree to have her heard.
I just make a point, Mr. Chair, is that I ran into Eileen Narrett this morning at Town Hall. I believe that Tracy is her daughter. The Narretts own the old rail line that abuts the strip, abuts the parking. And Mrs. Narrett made a complaint to me and to Bill about the fact that we were having this meeting on Zoom instead of in person. And so I think that I wouldn't assume necessarily that they were speaking pro or against. I don't know what but they are the abutter, the immediate abutter.
I see.
So
I see. Ms. Narrett, would you like to be heard?
Hmm.
Bill, while we wait for Ms. Narrett, is there anybody else who'd like to be heard in support of the application for the amendment to the special permit?
I don't see any other hands.
Okay.
No.
Let me ask if there's anybody who'd like to be heard in opposition to the application for the amendment to the special permit.
Okay, Paul Doherty has raised his hand. Paul,
Mr.
you should be able to be heard now.
Welcome to the Board of Appeals.
All right. Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, my name is Paul Doherty. I live at 8th Thistle Avenue, which is diagonally across from the post. I've lived here for over 30 years, and my wife grew up in a house going back to 1961, before this post existed. I was the one that called the town to inquire about the trucks being parked at the post. This must not be allowed to happen. The post is supposed to be a nonprofit operating within the Residence A zone in the town of Milton. The town donated this property back to the post in 1964 for a total of $0. I wonder if the town only knew back then what the post would be asking today. Would you think they'd be happy with this? I don't think so. The post already receives $4,500 a month for the lease of the cell tower. They are now receiving about the same amount, leasing out the area to Quiche Excavating. That's approximately something over $100,000 a year of outside revenue for a nonprofit. There are many other Legion posts in surrounding towns that do not lease out their property. The McKean, the Morissette, the Nickerson Post, to name a few. The amount and type of equipment being stored on this property is outrageous. The number of large 10-wheelers, tractors, excavators, and other construction equipment is unsightly. Not to mention the diesel, gas, and other fluids that could be dripping out of this equipment into conservation land. No taxpayer, resident of this town, should need to see something like this while sitting from their front lawn or looking out their front windows. This would not be allowed on any other private property in a residence zone area in the town. Other nonprofits as Milton Academy, Milton Hospital, or any one of our churches would not be allowed to do this. I'm sure none of the neighbors of these properties I'm sure the neighbors of these other properties would be just as upset. I'm asking you to deny this variance or modification to the post. Thank you. And while I was in listening to these other comments, I'd just like to add a few more things. Well, I did attend the neighborhood meeting that was set up by Mr. Kevin Chisholm. And he told me he would invite the whole neighborhood and put notice in everybody's mailbox. But what we actually got was about emails to 6 different houses, 5 or 6 houses. And while there were some 20 to 30 people that attended this meeting, none were really from our neighborhood except for 6 or 7 folks. The rest were just residents of the town, which is fine. They were all fans of the post. You know, and they always like to drag down the previous board. But I've been in front of this board of appeals before for other events, for other requests from the post. The last one I think was like parking buses on the lot that was not approved. I think the cell tower went up without any neighbor's input. I'm sure it was. I suspect the post asked for the variance after its construction. Exactly what is happening now with this modification. Their attitude is, let's do this and ask for permission later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Appreciate your testimony. Bill, is there anybody else who would like to be heard in opposition?
Before, I'm sorry, I'm very sorry, Mr. Chair, if I may interrupt for just a moment. I just noticed that there are a number of individuals who've already commented who are still on the screen, and many of them are unmuted, and it's causing a little bit of noise coming in. So I would ask Mr. Chair if it would be okay to ask them to mute or to move them back to attendees.
Yeah, either. I think they should be muted. I appreciate the point, Mr. Hart. And if people who are not being heard could be muted, that would be helpful to the board. Thank you.
Yep.
Bill?
And I see Tracy Nerritt's hand has gone up again.
Ms. Narrett?
She's unmuted.
Is Ms. Nerritt the last person to be heard, Bill? Is there somebody else that is waiting?
A number of people have raised their hands and seem to have taken them down. So I think that might be it.
Okay. Let me ask, before we close the evidentiary portion of the hearing, whether or not there's any additional questions members of the board would like to ask of the applicant.
I have one question.
Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. McKettrick, you had suggested one thing to consider, and I don't know that we will consider it, but one thing to consider would be, for example, a time limitation of some kind, so we could revisit. I'm curious to know, there was a passing comment you made about the potential for using this to shore up financial issues is potentially being time limited. And so I'm wondering, maybe that was a passing comment, maybe I misunderstood, but I guess I'm wondering if we were to consider that, if you were to suggest it, what would a reasonable time period be that would at least give the post some opportunity to realize some revenue, but also us an opportunity to revisit?
Well, there are several reasons for suggesting a time limit from the board's perspective, which is that you have control over whether the use continues if it's not satisfactory in the end. The time limit really ought to, I would think a 3-year permit would be reasonable. I also am not sure whether there are good commercial tenants, that would engage in and undertake the improvements that have been promised, the fencing, the landscaping, with, say, a 6-month permit or a year permit. For other purposes, sometimes a shorter term would make sense. My thought was that the board might want to consider a time-limited permit, perhaps 3 years, after which time, if the post wishes to continue the use, they have to come back again before the Board of Appeals and apply again, basically. There's no right to continue. I wasn't trying to suggest that if they were able to do this for 3 years, they would dig themselves out of some kind of financial hole and then everything would be fine. However, 3 years would be better than nothing. It would definitely keep them going for the present time. I also want to point out that their lease for the monopole does end. This board has to, by the way, issue that by special permit. It's not a variance. It's actually much more like an as of right use, because unfortunately or fortunately, telecommunications facilities where there's a gap are allowed, and the town can only put conditions, certain conditions and restrictions on such. uses. So I wasn't involved in that in any way. That goes back many years. In fact, in some ways, it's been difficult for the Post because of that monopole there. They can't really do anything else with that site. But in any case, that's going to end in 2029. So that revenue stream could be going away at that point or not. But no, I wasn't trying to suggest that 3 years would be enough and then we no need to continue. And I don't know, maybe before we conclude the discussion, if any member of the board from the Post wants to add to my response, that would be fine. My understanding is simply another way that would help them finance what they have always liked to do for the town, the services, the scholarships, the support for sports leagues, and most importantly, the services for veterans.
I appreciate the clarification. Thank you, Ms. McKenna.
Mr. Doherty, would you like to be heard? Mr. Doherty, you're on mute. The board can't hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, so he just unmuted me. That cell tower is not going to go away. And what's going to happen? That cell tower in 2029 is they're just going to go up on price. So then the Post will be getting $6,000 or $7,000 a year. And the same thing with lease rent in this property. It may start off at $4,500 to $5,000 in 3, 4, 5, 6 years, whatever you determine. It's going to go up to 8, 9, or 10. So now, I mean, none of these other places, there's no Post around here in Randolph, Canton, Quincy that needs an extra $100,000 to $150,000 to $200,000 to survive.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Bill, is there anybody else who'd like to be heard on the application before we close the evidence? Mr. Chisholm.
Thank you. Just briefly, since my name was invoked. In regards to the neighborhood meeting, which I did help organize, there was significant outreach made to neighbors via email. The Cortlandt Circle, Thistle Ave neighborhood is not a big one, but there was significant outreach via email, along with some flyers to neighbors. And yes, there were a handful of neighbors there. Not every neighbor was there, with in addition to several town meeting members elected to represent Precinct 7, of which, of course, Post 114, our neighborhood, is in. Obviously, we would have liked to see more folks there, but given the importance of the meeting and the time sensitivity of it, there were, I guess, less folks than we wanted there to be. But I just wanted to make that point that there was outreach to several of our neighbors, and there continues to be outreach on that front as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chisholm.
Thank you very much.
Carlson.
Yes, sir. Hi, my name is Jack Carlson. I'm the commander of Post 114. Thank you for having me, and I want to say thank you for having this meeting. What we're trying to do is trying to get this place up and going. What we've dealt with over the years that's come up to now within the last year that we've are trying to get this place up and running, the taxes, everything we've done. So I don't even know how to. So what I want to say is right now, Mr. Doherty was the complainant. Everything he's saying is speculating. The money we get from the tower doesn't even come up to half of the money he says we're making. And that money that we make from the tower barely keeps us above water to keep the Post running. Between the lights, the heating, to keep the place going. I mean, if you think about it, he's telling you we're making $100,000 off that tower. We're not making that, sir. We're not making anywhere near that. And even with the two entities on both sides, That doesn't even come anywhere close to the 100,000 that he's talking about. So unless he has receipts to show you this, it's all speculation, sir. What we're trying to do is trying to keep this place above water. What we've done is made it respectable, and we're trying to keep it going for the community. We donate everything. Everything that comes into this property goes to the community. We're trying to keep, we put money towards all youth sports. We let the hall be used by the high school sports. That's all we're trying to do, and keep it going. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Mr. Doherty?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just told by some sources that's what you get. So I know from the old board it was $2,500 a month, and that goes back
25.
almost 20 years. So that lease has been renewed a number of times. So you're telling me you're still only getting $2,500?
Mr. Doherty, excuse me, this is not a conversation between you and Mr. Carlson. This is a hearing in front of the Board of Appeals about an amendment to a special permit. So
Understood.
giving you a fair amount of time to make your points. If you've got something additional you'd like to add to the board, you're welcome to do so. But I can't let you get involved in a back and forth with Mr. Carlson.
Understood.
About allegations.
Understood. I apologize.
You're welcome. No problem. Is that all you have
Yep.
to offer?
That's it. Except for Miss Nerett is definitely a neighbor behind. So I'm sure I've spoken to Bobby. He couldn't make it here tonight, but they were against this. They have been in the past every time I went to a board's meeting with them.
Yeah, I remember the hearing on the buses as well. Yep, that's accurate. Mr. Carlson, do you have something you'd like to add to your testimony?
Yes, sir. Besides what he's saying about Miss Narrett, she's not here to speak. I wish she was. We've been trying to work with her over the years. And what we're going to do with the contract is that if we're allowed to have them there, they will build a fence to make sure we have no problem with their property whatsoever. And again, and I got to say, everything this gentleman is saying is speculation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carlson. All right, I'm gonna, unless there's somebody else who'd like to be heard on new information to present it to the board, or if Mrs. McKetrick has something that she'd like to add, or if any of the board members have a question.
Fuck her in the face. Sorry.
Did he hear that?
I think so.
Oh, that's not good.
Oh, that's not good.
Mr. Carlson, you might want to be muted.
Yeah, I messed up there.
Okay, unless there's somebody else who would like to be heard. Ms. O'Donnell, did you have a question?
No.
Okay, fine. All right. I'm going to close the evidentiary portion of the hearing and discuss the merits of the application in accordance with the open meeting law. Ms.
We had
O'Donnell?
one more raised hand from an
okay.
iPhone unidentified. Pardon me a moment.
Okay, maybe please identify yourself and your name and your address for the board, please.
Hello.
Yes.
Hey, how you doing? My name's Dan Lane. I'm on the e-board up there at 114, and I see firsthand what we've done since last April as far as what we've given back. I have 2 children that live in the town that go to school and play sports, and to be able to then, I've been a member since I got out of the service there, and getting on the board and being able to decide and help allocate with these other gentlemen on the board to where this money's going, especially for these youth sports. Steve Novak, Milton American Baseball, Mary Fireband, Tim Allen, Christine Brown, parents of children in active organizers in each sport. Steve always says to me, listen, we love very much that we have Milton American Legion as a yearly sponsor. Not because of who we are, what we do, is because a lot of sponsors in these towns, especially in Little League, from what I've seen, I've coached there. You got like families of children who will sponsor a team if they have a business, and then a couple of years later, when their child's out of the league, their sponsorship goes with them. Not, I mean, that's just how it is. It's great that they do that, but the way I see it, I see what we're doing, and we could be a sponsor for years and years to come. We have that ability to do. We have such a resource over there in the land, and we want to do everything we can to be good to the neighbors as far as aesthetics and things like that. The things that Mr. Doherty's talking about as far as what we get and what we're doing with the money, he has zero idea what it is. And I'm shaking thinking about the things he's saying because of the work I've been putting into that place. It's just it's hard to hear. He has no idea what we've went through and what we're doing to try to resurrect this place. I've been donating pretty much a full-time. I'm a firefighter, and anytime I'm at the firehouse, I'm down there. The guys that are with me on this, they're honorable, all served. They serve their communities as first responders now. I grew up in the neighborhood. I took a bus with all the kids around Cortland to Collycott Elementary. We need this. We need this, and the idea of a special permit to come up for review. These things that we're telling you that these contracts are going to do, they're going to do it. We need them. They're going to help us because we do have issues with that parking lot. They can help us with that. Kevin Doherty, who's got trucks over there, the Conservation Commission had issues with the amount of trucks. He's moved them. They're gone. He's also helps us in the winter with part of his license agreement. He does all our snow removal. It's like a relationship we need. It's vital that we have this, and I hope you guys consider all of everything that we do, not in the town with what we're giving. We have the ability to do so much more. I look at the town. We asked the residents about an override of $10 million. I was for it. I'm full disclosure. I was for it. I have friends whose siblings are teachers, but on top of that, here we are. We're giving back. We want to. I'm sorry. I go on, but thank you for hearing me out.
Mr. Lane, point's been made. We appreciate your testimony. Is that the end of your testimony, Mr. Lane?
Yeah, yes, sir. Thank you for hearing me.
You're welcome. Mr. Doherty, I've closed the evidentiary portion of the hearing. Do you have something you'd like to add? Mr. Doherty?
I understand that the Post does do a lot of wonderful things, but what we're up to discuss tonight is the parking 24 hours of all these trucks and heavy duty equipment, and it's ugly. That's all I can say. That's all I want to leave it with.
Thank you. Fair point. Okay. Mr. Garvey.
All right, I'll be quick. What I'm hearing is the trucks. Mr. Doherty lives across the street from the park and ride. That is a state lot that is disgusting. The Legion is nowhere near as bad as that.
Yeah.
I just don't see. I just don't see. We're not talking apples and oranges here. We're basically talking if the view of that is, has he gone to the state? I mean, that's pretty much all I have to say. Okay. Other than obviously the other party that is in disagreement stands to profit from the land if it was sold.
Thank you, Mr.
All right,
Garvey.
and this is my neighborhood, and for years people have been trying to knock it down across the street and put up high rises. It's just disgusting that every few years we have to come back to this. It's somebody just trying to attack this, small plot of land.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey. All right, the evidentiary portion of the hearing is over. I appreciate everybody's testimony, and I think the board has given people ample time to testify. Let me get back to the point I was making, asking my members of the board if they'd like to be heard about the merits of the application in accordance with the open meeting law. Ms. O'Donnell.
I just would point out that actually I live in precinct 7 as well as many of the speakers. And I can appreciate the fact that every time we have another meeting before the ZBA or for the planning board, that there's complaints about the traffic and the parking and et cetera, et cetera. And as Mr. Mullen knows well from his hearings for the projects that have gone up in East Milton. So, I'm appreciative of the idea that there's construction vehicles could avoid being parked on our streets and being parked someplace in a parking lot. So, I don't really have any, I don't have any questions. As I said, I've done some, research. I know the property pretty well. And, I would point out to some of the attendees that the installation of cell phones, as Attorney Marion McEtrick pointed out, are protected use under state law. And so there wasn't really much that the town can do to avoid putting in a cell phone on a cell phone tower on a site. And having negotiated many of those leases myself with cities and towns, I'd be shocked to think that they were making $100,000 a year.
Thank you, Ms. O'Donnell. Mr. Hart, anything you'd like to add?
Sure. I guess I would say first, I'm in support of providing a variance with conditions. I want to be supportive of the hall, but just thinking narrowly about the variance question in front of us.
Not a variance.
It's a special permit.
Pardon me. You're right. I'm sorry. I misspoke.
Okay.
Yes, the question in front of us. I don't have any personally. I don't have any issues with the request. I think that the proposal to add the screening is directly responsive to the concerns of the complaint, which I appreciate. I think that could be an explicit condition if provided. I like the idea of making it time of having them come back in whatever the case may be, 3 years, primarily to make sure that it works, that the screening in fact is effective, that it provides the kind of shielding from potential unsightliness that neighbors have expressed concern about, butters have expressed concern about. I think that that's appropriate. And if not, whatever the board is then can either reconsider that condition or reconsider the request. So that's my view of where this should land.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. I mean, let me say, as the acting chair here, I listened to the testimony, appreciate people's objections, and I was also on the panel about the buses, which seemed to me to be a reasonable use, but was objected to pretty significantly in that hearing, which is now, I believe, several years ago. That's the first point. Second point is we're talking about an amendment to the special permit. And the standard, as Mrs. McKettrick indicated, is that the desired relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantially derogating from the intent and purposes of the bylaw. To me, a part of what that's about, it's a balancing test. And I think that's indicative of the testimony we've heard today, where the board is really faced with the potential impacts from the proposed use that would be permitted under the special permit with the potential benefits, and whether or not the totality of that is consistent, is both, not doing substantial detriment to the neighboring properties, or the public good, and the overall consistency with the bylaw. I think this permit can be amended with conditions along the lines of what we've talked about. And I would like to propose to the board the following. I think the use needs to be articulated on a better defined plan. Whether that's a sketch or an engineered drawing, I will leave to the building commissioner, but I don't think that I think the plan we've got is adequate for the hearing. But I think if you were to take this to a proposed use, I'd like to see where the fence is exactly going to be and where the landscaping is going to be. And I'd like to articulate how the gates are going to work and things like that. An adequate plan. I'd like that plan to be submitted to the building commissioner. I'd also like that plan, or propose that plan go to the Conservation Commission, because I think it's important that the Conservation Commission be put on notice as to what the use is all about. I think that the screening needs to be a combination of planting and the 6-foot fence that was shown on the drawing. This board, speak for myself, but I'm going to say that this board is not an expert in landscaping, and I would like to suggest that the appropriate kind of screening, whether that's the evergreen trees that have been shown, or the flowering trees or evergreen, I don't know, but I do think the building commissioner will know. The intent is that the screening be adequate to screen the use from the neighboring properties, which is the real purpose of what the screening is all about. And I would like to suggest that we have a condition to that effect. And lastly, I'd suggest that this use be limited, as Mr. Hart has suggested, that this use be limited to a 3-year period. And that the applicant be affirmatively required to come back to the board at the end of that, or prior to the end of the 3-year period, to see whether or not it was appropriate that it continued to meet the standard of the bylaw that was then in effect. Lastly, I think the special permit should be clear that the permit can be reviewed at any time that the board believes appropriate based on the facts and circumstances presented to the board through the building commissioner or otherwise. I put that on the table for the members of the board to consider. Ms. O'Donnell.
Actually, I like that idea. I was thinking that the time limit should be tied to the time limit for the cell tower, so that those both could come, sort of at the same time. And that's 4 years, I think, is when Miss McKettrick said that the lease for the cell tower expired.
It's not the lease, it's your permit.
Our permit.
The Board of Appeals permit they're granted for 5-year periods, apparently, in 2024, you granted a 5-year permit. This board, well, not necessarily you, but.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I was thinking that I'd sort of, because it may be that's a time to revisit the whole thing, because who knows what's happening with the cell tower at that point.
I agree.
Yeah, board is deliberating right now, so we're not taking testimony. We've taken the testimony, so people who aren't you can listen, of course, it's open meeting, but we're not accepting testimony, so people can please be muted. Mr. Hart?
Mr. Chair, I'm in agreement with that plan, and it sounds sensible, and I would vote to adopt it. I do have a question. One of the conditions that you place, it sounds sensible to me, is that a more detailed plan be presented to the building commissioner. My only question, and maybe this is just a me question as opposed to an anybody else question, the commissioner would then have to approve it, or is it sufficient to simply send it into the commissioner so that then they can proceed with building the screening and et cetera?
Well, there's going to have to be consultation with the commissioner about the type of screening that is going to be done to affect the purposes that the board is expressing at this hearing. So one of the primary purposes of the plan is to articulate that screening specifically and be placed on file so that they can then be judged against as to whether or not it's compliant. But as importantly, this plan would have dimensions on it, would show the length and the depth of the parking areas, which I believe there are 2. So that was my thinking. I don't have an objection to the time period being timed with the cell tower. I still want to make this more complicated than it needs to be, and I was actually in favor of the 3 years because it seemed like a reasonable period of time to both make the investments that were required.
Oh, yeah, it was just a suggestion to sort of say, kind of just do it all, sort of have it time, but I don't have a problem with 3.
Yeah, I'd rather actually stick with 3. I think
okay.
Okay.
But I would say, because I've sat on the planning board too, where you really get into this kind of nonsense.
Yes.
Nonsense. I shouldn't say nonsense, but you get into this sort of detail. Is that, I would say in the conditions that we would have the conditions would be the fencing as proposed by the applicant I know they've planted, these lovely trees, but they're not very big. And I also would like to see in the sort of corner that's facing the neighborhood that there were evergreens, because you want, the flowering trees aren't going to be particularly useful in the winter if we ever have winters again.
I
So
think that's appropriate for the decision, but I think that
Yeah.
the type, the extent, the height, the
Right.
mix should be left to the professionals. That's really the point. With the overall intent of what that's
Yeah.
all about. That makes sense. All right, let me ask if there's anybody on the board who has an additional comment to be made about those conditions that have been outlaid with respect to the amendment of the special permit.
None from me.
No, thank you.
There's a motion on the table that would, under which the board would vote to adopt, to issue to the applicant an amendment to the special permit along the lines articulated in this hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so moved. I as well. The board has issued an amendment to the special permit, conditional amendment, expressed by the by the board in the open session that we've just had. Mrs. McKettrick, you well know the procedure that the board will follow. Will write a decision, you'll be filed with the town clerk. You'll be provided with a copy for recording and address it appropriately. In the meantime, I recommend that the applicant begin to make the preparatory steps in anticipation of working with the building commissioner, and should probably also notify the building commissioner of this hearing, given the fact that this was in response to a specific complaint. Is there any questions, other business before the Board of Appeals tonight?
None from me, Mr. Chair.
I'd like to request a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's 8:30, 8:26 p.m. on Thursday evening. The Board of Appeals is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank
Have a
you.
good-
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. McKettrick. Thank you, everyone.
Bye now.
Thank you, board.
Thank you.
Good night.
Not all.
Good night, Bill. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.